All right. How are you guys feeling about this series coming to an end this week? Everybody say, "Aww." I know. But this is week 5 of our current series, Relationship Goals. And unfortunately, today it is coming to an end. Okay, so for the last 4 weeks, and now for the 5th week, we've been talking about how God created relationships. He designed them. They were His idea. And so that's why He gives us so much instruction for how we are to operate in these relationships. He gives us instruction because He wants us to experience relationships to the full capacity of His design. God doesn't instruct us to withhold things from us. He instructs us so that we would experience them to the best, so that we would have them the greatest possible. And so on week 1, we talked about how we are to be complete with God and be content in Him and not with another person. Then we talked about marriage and how God designed that relationship to operate. We talked about love and what it means to truly love someone, how love is not a noun, love is a verb. It's something that we act on and then we feel. It's not the other way around. And last week, we talked about sex. We talked about how God designed that, and just like we said, He designed it and gives us instructions so that we can experience it to the best of its ability. And so as I prayed this whole series about how we end, how do we end a series that has been this good? Am I right? How could we wrap it all up? And I just felt that God gave me the perfect ending to this series. I believe that this is going to be the most powerful week of this series, and maybe for some of us the most profound. And that is that today you are not going to hear from me. Yeah. Today, you will get the opportunity to hear from a woman that is not just beautiful, is not just talented, but is incredibly wise and gifted by God. I believe even anointed to speak and teach on this sort of series specifically. So church, would you please stand to your feet and welcome to the stage my beautiful bride, Reba, our worship leader. Come on, let's honor her as she comes to the stage today. You can come and have a seat. Thank you, everybody. You may be seated. So, today you are going to get to hear from my wife as we wrap up this series. So what this is going to look like is for the first about 20 minutes, we're going to be kind of hashing out this series. And you're going to share things that God put on your heart. Because how many of you know that a woman's perspective is sometimes different than a man's perspective? Anybody? Yeah. So we're gonna do that for the first 20 minutes. And then the second 20 minutes, we are going to be answering questions that you guys write in during these first 20 minutes, right? So, can you explain how that works?
This is another time you get to pull out your phones. So if you go into your web browser and type in menti.com, it's up here on the screen, and they'll ask you to type in a code. The code is these numbers over here. And then you type in a question to us. It's all anonymous, so you don't have to worry about that. And we have got this pulled up on our computer here, and we'll be able to see all of your questions. So then after the 20 minutes, we'll go through and answer some of these questions. We may not be able to get to all the questions, so if your question doesn't get asked, don't be disappointed. If there's a lot of questions left over, we're planning on doing even a Facebook Live later this week to finish answering all those questions.
Yeah, so you guys can go to that website right now, menti.com, and put in that 6-digit code. I just did it right here. And there's just one button that says ask a question. And so right now you can start. And during this whole 20 minutes that we're talking, we want you guys to write in questions. Right now it says no questions from the audience, okay? So you have to start writing in some questions, and we're going to answer those right here live in the service. One other thing that we wanted to mention. If any of you have missed a week of this series. Maybe you were out of town or it was too cold. I totally get it. If you missed any week of this series, we want to just let you know, we've found out that some of you don't know, on Mondays we post the message videos from Sunday onto our website. So if you go to our website, do we have that on the screen or is that just pre-service? Yeah, pre-service. But if you go to our website, mylivingwaters.org, and right at the top, click the button that says messages. It brings you to our YouTube page, and you can watch any video that we've done since I got here back in October. You can watch any of those messages back live. So make sure to do that too. Oh, we are, how many? 5 questions came in. Praise God. So keep writing those in. And over the next 20 minutes, we'll be talking a little bit, and then we'll start answering your questions. Sound good? So today, we get to hear your perspective. So we're going to go through the series and get to hear what you thought about these services. So in week 1, we talked about how a person can't complete you, but they can only complement you, right? We said that to be complete is to be content with God and what he has given us now. So what were your thoughts from that week?
Yeah, I loved this series. It's so true, and I think that when he did this series, he really was talking a lot to the singles, because I think that's a really hard time when you think, if I just find the right person, I'll be happy. Or, if I just find the right one to marry, which we all fall into that. Although I feel like right before I met you, I had gotten to the place where I'm like, I'm good. I'm complete. I don't need anyone. But it challenged me in that message because I realized as a married person, that is something I have to still do daily, because you get comfortable with a person, or his strengths are my weaknesses. And so it's easy to think that, oh, well, I'll just let him take care of that, or I don't have to work as hard in certain areas that really I need to always be keeping that in check, making sure that I don't put him or even my kids as an idol in my life. And my relationship with God is my own, and his is his own, and I need to constantly be aware of that and keeping that intentional. So that was really, actually, that was a message that really convicted and challenged me in my own marriage. So,
oh, I love that. That really, being single and being complete doesn't stop when we're married. It's still something we have to keep up, and I think we can forget that. I love it. That week, our main scripture we started with was Philippians 4:12 through 13. And it says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. This is Paul writing. He says, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want, I can do all this through him who gives me strength. What has that process of being content with God looked like for you?
When I was 18, my father died in my arms right before I went to college. And it was a very traumatic experience, as you can imagine. But what came from that was an intense anxiety because it happened very suddenly and out of nowhere. And so the reality of that, we never know when our time is up, was so real to me. And so anytime somebody would leave, like my mom or siblings would drive to the store, I'd be like, oh my gosh, they're gonna get in a car accident. Like panic attacks all the time. Just this feeling of I'm so out of control of my life and the things that are happening around me, which I've always been, but the reality of it was so strong. And though I've worked through a lot of that anxiety, it was almost like, okay, now I'm married. I've got this great man in my life. Now I have kids who I just love with everything in me. And I have to really learn to not hold so tightly to these, because ultimately God is the one that has given them to me as a gift. And so every day that I get with them is a blessing from him. And there's going to come a time when I might have to let that go. And so being content with God looks a lot like that in my life, is not letting that anxiety take over of, well, what if I lose somebody? And it's, again, that too is a daily choice, to lay them down, the people that I love and the things that I love, to give them over to God every day.
Yeah, I remember when God was kind of starting that process in you, and I remember there were some nights where you would just be processing with me, like working through that idea that you have to let me go. Like thinking of me being gone and you being okay. And that process, it took some time, right? It took a while for that to sink in. But it's powerful when you have that trust and that stability. It brings peace. You know, that's the peace of God that surpasses all understanding. Awesome. In week 2, then we talked about marriage, which we have a little bit of experience in. Not a whole lot, but some. And we talked about how marriage is a covenant between two people. We learned that a marriage is the epitome of marriage is Christ in the church. The perfect example of a marriage is what Jesus did for us. So we're challenged to strive for mutual serving. What was your perspective on that? What does that mean to you, mutual serving in a marriage?
Well, I think it's easy to serve the other person when it makes sense or things are going well. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the 5 love languages, or maybe you've read that book or done some research on that. That has been super helpful for us because the way that I show him love and respect isn't really always how he receives it, and vice versa. And so for him, doing acts of service is like he'll just take care of everything for me, which is great, but I don't necessarily feel loved through that all the time. And so serving, I think, both means that I understand that that's what he's doing and that's how he's loved, and I just need to accept that, whether it feels like it to me or not. Understanding that is really helpful, but then also learning that about him so that I know how he feels loved, and same for me. So when he'll do things for me, I'm like, that's great, but you know what, honey, I could really just use you like going to the store and just picking me up something that reminds you of me. Like, giving gifts is my love language.
Hers is gifts. That is my lowest one.
Yes,
lowest.
He's terrible at it. Ugh. So I'm like, I just like feel like you just need to, can you just buy me something? It doesn't have to be a big thing, but like, just, can you think of me? Or the times when you do and then you don't buy anything, I'm like, it doesn't even matter what it is. Just that you thought of me means a lot. So
tell the story of my epic fail that one time.
I was having a really bad day. And he's like, so if I were to go to the store and like, would you want to be in the mood for like flowers or chocolate? Or I was like...
Or Oreos.
Or Oreos.
That's a common one, yeah.
And I was so overwhelmed. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I can't even make a decision right now. And so I didn't give him an answer. So he comes home and I'm kind of like, I wonder which one he picked. He didn't pick anything. I was like, that is not better.
Guys, don't do that.
Not just because I don't decide. You just had to pick something. That was like 2 weeks ago. So we're still working on it.
Longer than 2 weeks ago. Okay, it was like 2 months ago, I think. But anyways.
Very rough.
Don't do that, guys. Don't do that one. That's what not to do.
But it did mean a lot to me that you thought of that, because sometimes it takes a lot of, you don't want to have to tell them, you know, you don't want to have to say, can you buy me something, or can you like rub my feet if you're a physical touch person, or you know, like, you don't want to have to say those, but you just do. You just have to say it, and eventually a couple more years, 10 more years, maybe they'll start to figure it out.
Those of you that have been married for 50 years, does it ever finish the learning process? No. It gets better, but it's not done.
At least you asked. But the follow-through is...
Oh, for sure. So that week we talked about Ephesians 5:21, how in verse 21 it says, submit to one another. And that's where we get that mutual submission. You know, you hear in the Bible, oh, wives submit. Well, no, it says right there, submit to both. It's both of us, but how that looks is different. Wives, submit yourself to your husbands. And then in verse 25, it says, husbands, love your wives. And so that's been the big thing for us, realizing that we don't receive love the same. That it is the same, but how we do it for one another is different. And so you study your spouse. And that's the challenge I would give to you guys. A lot of times us guys, this is one of the biggest hiccups that we have when we get married, is when we're dating, we're pursuing. And then when we think we're married, we think the pursuing, the chasing, the studying has to stop. That's when it should continue and even speed up. that guys never stop pursuing your wife, never stop chasing after her, learning her, studying her, because that's what she wants. Her greatest desire is just to be known, just to have someone who wants to know her feelings, her thoughts, her ideas.
And not always fix it sometimes.
Yeah, that's a whole nother message. Don't try to fix it, just acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And then wait. That's basically the idea. It's just as awkward in marriage, okay? So, yeah. Week 3 then. We continued on and we talked about love. We said how the world makes love a noun, but Jesus made love a verb. He told us to love, not to feel love, but to love, to make it a verb. So what were your thoughts on that? We kind of touched it a little bit, but what does love look like?
I think it's important to remember that not just a marriage, but any relationship, they're always moving. They're very organic. And so you're never just staying the same. You're either drifting apart or you're moving closer. And this is something that I've been very aware of, and I make you very aware of in our marriage. For example, the week of the big move in here, I mean, Nick was here like 12 hours a day, most days that week. And that was hard on me. And I knew that it was going to be like that.
Because the quality time is her number 2 love language.
Yes, that's very important to me. And even though it was hard, I still knew it, but it didn't make it any easier. And for me, as a woman, the security was starting to dwindle a little bit. Like, okay, it's fine, but what's going to happen after this week? You know, like, is it going to still be like this? Are we going to ever have time to just, like, be, you know, is it going to always be busy? And just communicating about that stuff, because there's going to be times in life where things are busy, or you're far apart for whatever reason. And that's okay. You can't avoid those times. But communicating and saying, hey, I know that this week's really busy, but I still thinking about you. I haven't forgotten, and we'll plan a time next week to just be alone. And it doesn't have to be a long time. It doesn't have to be a big extravagant thing. I think we can underestimate the power of those small moments. Times of just saying, how was your day? Or, hey, I remembered that you had this going on. How did that go? Those little things those bring you closer together. And so I think it's just always good to remember that it's kind of like a bank account. You just want to make more withdrawals or more deposits than you're withdrawing, because those things are going to happen. But they say it takes 10 compliments to cover over 1 insult. So make a lot of compliments. Always notice the things that you think you shouldn't have to say anything for anymore, but they make a big difference. So I just love being that action, always, never just think that, oh, we're fine, I don't have to work at it anymore. You're always working.
That making love a verb makes love the noun. I heard this great quote this week, that the grass is greener on the other side because it's being watered. And in our marriages, I think that is such a profound picture. That, no, it's not that, oh, well, they just have it all together. It's not just natural, it's not easier. No, the grass is greener where it's watered. And when we choose to make that deposit into the love bank, that's watering our yard. That's investing in our marriage. And you need that. You need that constant action, especially on the behalf of the man, to continue doing that, not just to stop when we get married. So last week, we had week 4 of the series. We talked about sex and how God made sex good, and because of that, we should protect it. He doesn't give us instruction to withhold. He does it to keep it as profound and powerful as he made it. So what did you want to add to that message last week?
Well, this last week was very emotional for me. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I do have so much history with this area, and I just want to make sure I hit everything. I kind of wrote some things down before. Last week, Nick put up the verse, 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7, and love is patient, love is kind, and he said, let's insert sex into that instead of love. Sex is patient, sex is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, so on. And I remember sitting listening to that and tearing up, because if you would have told myself that 7 years ago, I would have just probably one in 1 year out the other, because I just wouldn't think that's even possible. I wouldn't even believe that could be the case, or have any idea of that sort of love in the context of sex, because I had this association of pain, of feeling used. I had been sexually abused on multiple occasions, and some more intense than others. I was in a relationship where I was abused and raped and mistreated and controlled and manipulated. And when I had gone through that, I was so hardened to the point where even when we were engaged, I could not even think about sex without getting sick to my stomach. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I wish that it didn't exist. I wish that I would have been fine going the rest of my life without it. And the biggest thing I want to tell anybody in this room that maybe has a similar experience or just negative experience with sex is that there is hope. And I get emotional because God has literally done a miracle in my life. I love talking about this subject now because of the transformation that he's done in my life, and having somebody who's shown me what it's like to be kind, to be patient, to protect that has healed so many wounds. I mean, we were talking about, like, do you remember when we first got married? I mean, I unfortunately brought so much of that into my marriage, and yet the patience that it took, the communication that it took, I mean, it was like completely renewed my mind in this area, and it took a lot of years. It still comes up, and I still have to talk about it, and I hate talking about it, and I hate bringing it up, because I'm like, I wish this is nothing that you even did, and yet you're reaping the repercussions of this, you know. And I wish that I didn't have to have these distorted views or these distorted thoughts about what it's supposed to be, but man, like, it is possible, and there is hope, because now it's something that is life-giving, and it's powerful in our relationship, and I just know that it's a topic and an area that so many of us have had so much hurt. So I just want to give that hope for those of you who are experiencing that. And talking about it is probably the hardest thing to do, but it's the most important thing to do. And so if you might be holding on to something that happened years and years and years ago, and you still can't talk about it. And so I want to go first by telling you that I've been there, and if you need somebody to talk to, I'm a safe person to talk to and a safe place. If you don't know who else to go to, but find somebody that you feel safe to talk to. It might not be your spouse, and that's okay, it can get there, but just knowing that you have to sort through that, because it will affect everything. So.
Yeah, and I mean, your life is living proof of that thought that there's no wound too painful for God to heal. God can heal anything that's happened in our past. And so bring it to the light. If any of you have a situation like that, the only way it can get that healing is when we bring it to the light, when we share it with someone else. Because when things are put into the light, it casts out all darkness. And when we draw attention to it, though it's painful, it's necessary in finding that healing. Should we do this one? Our last scripture. In Romans 8:1, we talked about last week that there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, because through Christ Jesus, the law of the Spirit who gives life has set you free from the law of sin and death. What are your last thoughts as we are about to enter into questions? We have 13 questions right now that we're going to answer in just a sec.
Well, the last verse, too, that I love is Psalms 147:3, where it says, He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. There's some things that we don't want to deal with because they're too painful, and I get that. It took me a lot of years to talk about it. But just knowing that God wants to heal and bring life into those areas that Satan has tried to destroy and bring destruction makes it a little easier, I think. And that's why we need the church body, because we need people that can surround us and support us in these difficult things that we go through. We cannot do it alone. the worst thing you can do is isolate yourself. And I understand. I'm kind of what's the word? I'm like, when things
stuffer,
come up.
we say.
Not stuffer, but I like run away. I don't want to deal with this. It's too hard. It's too painful. And just having people that won't let you run away is really important and are there for you. So that's why we encourage you, get involved in a small group. Find those people that you can connect with.
Yeah, that's so good. Whatever your temptation, whatever your struggle, whatever seems to have you in bondage, that is broken when we expose it to the light, bring it to other people, and allow them to come into our healing process. So we have some questions. I think the first one is a good one to start with. What is the hardest thing you have experienced in your marriage? I think I know. I was thinking about it. The hardest thing that I think you've experienced is that when we get married, we had to realize that I was always right. Just kidding. Just kidding.
The hardest thing is that you think that still.
That was the
Don't
hardest thing, is
listen
that
to me.
we both came in with completely different perspectives, that I always thought I was right, but you always think you're right. And coming to the realization that that's not always true, that we're different, and that doesn't make them wrong. Like our first ways we handled conflict. We had this, I don't even know, was that over the dishes? When we were in our kitchen, having that big fight?
Yeah, I don't even know what it was about.
Yeah, it was some small little disagreement. And it was kind of escalating, and so Reba started shutting off. Tried to run away from the conflict. And I was like, well, tell me what's going on. Tell me what's going on.
Just talk to me.
Tell me what's going on. And
so then I start crying because he's yelling at me, and I'm doing the dishes because that's my way of trying to cope and work through my thoughts. And so then I start crying. He says, "Oh, you're gonna cry now?" And I was like, "What happened? What is this thing called marriage?" I just was like,
what did we do?
That was bad. I think one of the hardest moments in our times in our marriage was when our first was born, because he was a terrible sleeper, and he was up like all night.
Until 14 months, he never slept through the night.
It was up like 6 times a night. And it wasn't that, he kind of cries, so we go in there and pat him, he goes back to bed. It was like he wakes up and we need to hold him, for 1, 2, 3 hours at a time. And so we're so sleep deprived. And I just remember those 2 a.m. nights where I'd want to try to get him to sleep this way, but Nick would want to try to get him to sleep this way, or none of it worked. And so then you can't take it out on the baby, so you take it out on each other, and you have zero ability to control your emotions. And so, there's going to be times in your marriage where, whether it's a not sleeping child or a sickness or, something that comes where it's just really hard to work together and to handle things. And that was definitely a huge challenge. That year was rough. And then in the morning, you kind of have a little bit more sense. You're like, I'm sorry. Actually, I didn't really want to talk to you, probably. I probably thought that in my head, but...
Okay, next question. Why is my wife so beautiful? Oh, would all the guys raise your hands quick? Who wrote that? Yeah, we all did, right? No. Okay, we can mark that one as answered. Next question. How often do you have a date night day?
Oh my goodness. Can I just say how thankful I am for this church? Dave and Julie Stirk are 2 people who have stepped up and not just offered, but have said, you're going to have a date night. We're going to take the kids and you guys do something, take as long as you want. It has seriously, having those people, again, this is why we need the church. Because my mom is really the only grandma. My dad passed away, like I said. Nick's mom passed away. His dad isn't really involved. So my mom is grandma. She's the only one. And she lives about 3.5 hours away, which is a lot closer than we were. But still, it's not something where, if we need her, she can just come on over and give us a break. And so for those of you, I know it's not just Dave and Julie, but a lot of you have stepped up and just been available to help. Thank you for that.
Holmgren, Lynette,
it
Autumn,
is seriously,
so many of you have watched our boys. We've
been amazing.
Felt like our boys have been so welcomed and taken care of.
And loved. I feel like they have so many grandpa and grandmas now, and I love it. That didn't answer the question, but I just wanted to throw that out there. How often do you have a date night or day? I'd say we do it about every other week. Again, because of that. But there's times where we just intentionally do something that maybe isn't a date night out, but instead of sitting down and just watching Netflix, we'll play a game together. Or we'll just intentionally talk about, hey, what's been on your mind lately? And we'll just even take a half an hour and do that. And that is almost just as good as going out on a date, because it's after the kids go to bed. We're usually tired and just like want to zone out. But when we do take those times, it's always very bonding and it's very powerful, and I feel a lot closer to you and you feel closer to me. So sometimes you're not able to get out and do a date, or maybe sometimes it's like you don't have the money to go out and do that, but just taking those times to do something out of your norm can be really good too.
Yeah, I think it's our aspiration that we would eventually get to a place where it would be a weekly thing. We go on our weekly date nights, but I don't know, maybe this will bless someone. That's our goal. I've always wanted to enforce the weekly date night thing, but we're not there yet. So that doesn't mean we give up on the goal, because doing something is better than doing nothing. That we do it 2 times a month is better than doing it 0, But even beyond the date night, that daily investment where we put the boys to sleep and we just, even if it's 5 minutes, like, hi, let me look at your eyes for a second, and just that connect. That's the money in the bank. If and when you have a disagreement, it's not if, it's when, okay? You have conflict. If and when you have a disagreement, how do you forgive and forget? I think this is that resolution piece that we were talking about.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times, at this point now, we fight less, but it's usually about the same things. I feel like it's like, we're still arguing about this, What's really important is to find resolution. And what I mean by that is to not necessarily even understand. Like, there's things about Nick where I'm like, why do you leave the doors open? Like, just shut the cupboard door. Why is this so hard? Or put the milk back in the fridge. Things like that. And some of that stuff you just have to let go. I just had to it's fine. Try not to bring it up to him in this passive-aggressive way, but it's fine, But things that are really important to you, that hurt, or that, like, when you tease me, Nick, this really hurts my feelings, and I really want you to stop. Things like that. He might not think it's a big deal, or like, why is this so hurtful? Like, I'm not trying to hurt you, but hearing the person and just saying, because it hurts you, because it's important to you, I'm going to choose to hear that and respect that. So it's not even that he might even understand it still, but it's getting past the point of what the problem is and seeing the person versus just the problem has been huge. And so just being heard is really important. So, it can be frustrating that the other person sees something so differently than you. I think trying to get past the surface and trying why is this important? Or why is this important to me? Like, what does this actually come back to? And same thing for him. Again, it's all about being known. So it's not about having everything together or having all the answers or being perfectly in sync, because that'll never happen. But knowing the other person and respecting those things.
Yeah, and I think, so we want to strive for a resolution. And if there's a conflict, it can either be resolved and bring you closer, or it will not be resolved and it will be something that creates a separation between you two. That resolution is the deciding factor. And for us, something that we've gotten better at really recently is setting up the situation, the context of resolution, to be better susceptible. Meaning, if we have a conflict, planning out how we're going to resolve the conflict is key. Because when something frustrates you, maybe to bring up that thing that makes you upset in the moment isn't going to be conducive to reaching resolution, So what we've been doing a lot better is that rather than talking about it in the moment when we're mad and heated and the emotions are there, we'll step back, and then at a later time when it's a good moment, we're not stressed, we're not anxious about getting out the door, it's a good setting. We'll sit down and we'll talk about it. So the when is important, then how we present it is important. That we intentionally say, okay, Reba, I have something that I need to talk to you about, a conflict that I have that I need to express. So then it preps it, not just because then you answered why. Why are we talking? It's not, so those cupboards being left open. You know what I mean? It's just going directly to it. And then this has been given by so many people for advice how to talk about conflict, this is how you say something that upsets you. I feel blank when you do blank, or when you did this, I felt this. Reba, when Nick, you left 6 cupboards open, it made me feel really frustrated and want to hit you in the face because, but how you say it is important too, rather than saying, oh, you always, and you never. No, okay, when you did this, take all emotion out of it. When you did this, it made me feel this. And then the person receiving it acknowledged the feeling. I felt like this. Because that's the key to their anger, their frustration, the problem, is how it made them feel. Not even what was done, but how it made them feel is significant.
Well, I like this quote that I heard. People don't get upset about what you say, they get upset about why they think you're saying it. So for me to approach him, let's use the cupboard example. Say, I'm not trying to attack you, I just want to understand why you don't think of this. help me come into your mind. Is it because you just are on to the next thing? Understanding is key. Just to understand the other person, it might not even change anything, but it helps me not get so upset because I understand, or I can be more grace-filled, or I know how to talk about it next time because I understand where he's coming from. Because again, we all come from different perspectives, so understanding that perspective is key.
Yeah, so we have more questions. We got great questions here, but like we said, we're not going to have time to answer all of them. So we're going to answer one more set of questions, and then for the rest of you, at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, Reba and I will go live and answer on our Facebook page, the Living Waters Church Facebook page, the rest of these questions. So if any of you wrote in a question today, we will answer these questions on Tuesday at 9 o'clock. It'll be on our Facebook page then for the rest of the week, so you can watch any of those things, because we want to get to your questions, but we just don't have enough time. But last questions. What advice would we give to a single person or a married person? Like, just wrapping up this series, if one thing for a single and one thing for a married.
Okay. If you are single and you're looking for a spouse, become the person become the person, you say it, you can say it better.
If you're single, instead of looking for the right person, become the person who the person you're looking for is looking for.
Yes.
Become the person who the person you're looking for is looking for. Because rather than finding the right one, we should think about becoming the right one. Because that right one who's got this and loves God and is serving God and has a great family relationship and has all these sort of things, they're looking for a person like that. And so instead of finding them, your action can be becoming who the person that they're looking for is looking for. To married people, one last piece of advice. Oh, I don't even remember what we talked about. I would say that if one thing you're married, you take out of here, it would be that love bank deposit and withdrawal. The grass is greener where we water it. Invest in your marriage. It is literally, apart from your relationship with God, the most important relationship on the face of the planet. And where there is neglect, there will be a lack of fruit. And so if you're seeing the lack of fruit, just throw some water on it. Just let some sunlight get to it. Just invest. Keep depositing.
And expect nothing in return.
Yeah.
I think we talked about trust in here, but there's this book that we read the boys called Millie the Meerkat, and it's kind of basically the boy that cried wolf in meerkat form. And I love it because there's a part in there that says, there's like a wise meerkat that's talking to Millie. It says, nobody believes a liar even when they're telling the truth. And so speaking truth, and we all have those moments where we've said something or didn't say something that we should have. And so that mistrust and distrust has happened. Continue to speak truth, and eventually, because there's been things that happen, and I still am like, Nick, are you telling me everything? Are you being honest? And, it takes a lot of those moments to begin to trust. And so don't be discouraged if they're like, oh, they're just not believing me. Well, it's going to take a long time maybe for them to believe you, and a lot of time of speaking the truth. So it's not going to happen overnight, but begin to open that communication up.
Yeah. Well, everyone, can we thank my wife for coming up and sharing her story?